Welcome everyone to the Lofi Poli Sci podcast. I'm your host, Michael Pickering. That's right. Lo-fi as in low fidelity, low quality, in your face, messy as can be global news show. Here we're going to talk about our famous question. What's going on in the world today? And it's Wednesday. Time for that lo-fi global news, fresh off that press. From that world of NPR. The UN rights chief says reparations are needed for people facing racism. Michelle Bachelet, the chief of the institution known as the United Nations Human Rights, has been compiling a report on racism centered mostly around people of African descent from across the globe. And that report is out. And let's start with a quote from the chief. Begin quote. "We could not find a single example of a state that has fully reckoned with the past or comprehensively accounted for the impacts of the lives of people of African descent today." End quote. In short, the UN Human Rights Report is straight up saying everyone has work to do. And let's be clear, because this headline is not. The United Nations group is not saying just give reparations. In fact, they're saying there's a whole lot more needed than that in order to deal with systemic racism. Perhaps first and foremost, to acknowledge it exists. So where do we go from here? Well, the report from the UN calls on countries across the world to do their part and create positive change today that will make a better tomorrow. But let's be real. This is only a report calling for change. Real change has to come from the countries that inhabit the world. Real change has to come from us. So the UN Human Rights Group has spoken. Let's see what we do with those words. And we'll keep you updated on how countries respond to this for sure. Next up, source, the world of Reuters. Bill curtailing indigenous land rights advances in Brazil's Congress. Oh, come on now. Really? Let's dig into it. So a bill has passed Brazil's upper house and is going to the lower house for voting there, and then would almost certainly be signed into law by the president if it does clear the lower house. And what will this law do? Well, currently there are several legal disputes and court cases between big farm companies and indigenous groups about who has rights to the land. And without going into all the details, which you should read the article for, and in fact read multiple articles to get even more perspective. But this law will heavily favor farming companies, mining companies, logging companies, law enforcement and military going into indigenous lands, and basically a whole bunch of shit that the United Nations Human Rights Group would most certainly not like. In short, people want to take indigenous lands in the Amazon of Brazil for their own profit and say forget indigenous rights. Keep an eye on this one, Lo-Fi Nation. If this bill passes into law, we'll likely see some major things happening in Brazil very soon. Now, moving forward, because we never move on from anything. Source, the Africa section of the BBC. Ex-President Jacob Zuma, sentenced by South Africa's top court. Well, what do we have here? Former President of South Africa, former leader of the ANC party, the African National Congress party that has been in power since the end of apartheid, Jacob Zuma, is going to jail. That's right, he was thrown out of office for corruption, went to trial, found guilty, and now going to jail. Oh, no, hold your horses there. If you only read this headline, then that's what you would think is happening. But that is not at all what is going on here. You see, he's being sentenced for 15 months in jail for contempt of court because he hadn't been showing up to the proceedings to investigate his corruption. And after being ordered to do so, he just flat out refuses. So, the only way they think they can get him to court is by issuing a contempt of court order and sentencing him to 15 months for contempt of court. And then theoretically, he would be forcibly taken from jail to court proceedings about his corruption. And he has 5 days to turn himself in. And if not, then an arrest warrant will be issued for him. And let's be clear, Lo-Fi Nation, Jacob Zuma, the former president, he says all this is bullshit. And frankly, I'd wager there's a good chance that he doesn't show up and just splits the country and goes into self-imposed exile. Definitely keep your eyes open on this one, people, because a former president of a country doing time, this is a rare thing indeed. And our following story comes from the world of the Associated Press. Eswatini imposes curfew to quell pro-democracy protest. Eyes wide open on this one, Lo-Fi Nation. Because the South African nation of Eswatini, formerly known as Swaziland, well, shit's going down for real. Pro-democracy protests have been taking place in the country, demanding the king of the country turns toward democracy. And now, the king is forcing all businesses closed at 3:30 p.m. Schools are being shut down, and a 5 p.m. to 6 a.m. nationwide curfew is being put in place. The charge is that criminals are the protesters, and that this has nothing to do with democracy or human rights, or a king that's been in power for around 30 years that doesn't want to do anything but help himself. And listeners out there, if you're unsure what we're talking about in Eswatini, let me put it to you like this. The monarchy here is not like the Queen of England. It's not like the King of Spain. Oh, no. This king, he's like Louis XIV of France back in the day. An absolute monarch. Freedom House, which ranks countries 0 to 100 on freedoms, 0 being completely not free, and 100 being a true democracy. Eswatini is ranked a 19 out of 100. And to give you perspective, Russia is a 20 out of 100. Eswatini and their king is less democratic than Russia and Vladimir Putin. My friends, if that reference doesn't catch you, I'm not sure what will. Don't go to sleep on this one. Lots going down in Eswatini. And a last piece of news to send you on your way for the day. NPR Science Section. When a city-sized star becomes a black hole's lunch, the universe roils. My friends, this one, I'm going to just call it a lo-fi cool read, and I won't give you much more than just a few details about it. But a neutron star, a dense-as-hell neutron star, like denser than our sun, but only about the size of a city, is being swallowed up by a black hole, something we've never seen before. Like I said, lo-fi cool read this, people, and get your astronomy on. Wicked awesome stuff. And that, my friends, is a brief snapshot of what's going on in the world today. Check out yesterday's guest episode with writer, director, and voice behind Hipsville AD Gregory Day's Top 10 Genre and Exploitation Movie Starter Pack list. And come back tomorrow for either more of that lo-fi global news or connecting the dots. You'll have to wait and see. And always remember that Lofi Poli Sci is more than just me. It's the we that we be. Peace and well-being to all my human beings out there. Much love and always the best. Pickering, signing off.